Thank you so much for joining us. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on NJDEP's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program Kickoff Workshop. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank you all for taking the time to join us today. We are extremely excited to launch our CPRG efforts to the public. I am Aishwarya Mukund. I will be your workshop moderator for this event. I am joined by my colleague, Doug Benton, who will be moderating the chat. And today we will be hearing from Peg Hanna, the Director of Climate Mitigation and Monitoring Program, after which our lead presenter, Helene Barr, the Bureau Chief for the Division of Climate Change and Clean Energy, will be speaking to us about NJDEP's CPRG efforts, after which Stacy Richardson, the Deputy Director from NJBPU in the Division of Climate Clean Energy and thank you for joining us, Stacy, if you're here. Okay, next slide, please. Helene, next slide.
Are they not forwarding?
No, they're not.
I'm seeing webinar ground rules.
Oh.
Okay, great. So before we begin the presentation, there's some housekeeping that we should go through. Mostly being the participants are all muted. During the Q&A session, we will discuss how to express your questions and concerns. This meeting is being recorded. By attending this meeting, you consent to being recorded. A recording will be available on our website, which will be posted in the chat right now. And if you have questions during the course of the presentation, please add them to the chat with your name and affiliation. If you are having technical difficulties, please type your message in the chat. That way we can all try to identify a solution to your issues, and we may not have to troubleshoot the same issue for multiple people. Thank you. And also, our speakers will try to address as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation, but being on theme, which is CPRG, would be most helpful.
Are folks seeing the webinar ground rules now? I saw a couple comments. I just shared them a slightly different way. I just want to make sure folks are still seeing.
Slides seem to be advancing. Yep. And moving forward, I would like to introduce our director, Peg Hanna, and then move on to working through the EPA's CPRG, or the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program, and what we've submitted as the work plan within the Priority Climate Action Plan, and also possibilities and opportunities for engagement, and then move on to the question and answer session. So, Peg, do you take it away?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We have quite a great turnout today. It looks like we're pushing 150. I think we had 250 sign up. So thank you for joining us. I am the director of the Division of Climate Change Mitigation and Monitoring, which was the result of a reorg about 6 months ago with the intention of more closely aligning our climate planning and mitigation efforts. So here we are today talking to you again about climate. It seems like we do this about once a year. We've previously talked to you about the Energy Master Plan, then the Global Warming Response Act 80 by 50 report, and then some of you may also have participated in our RGGI Strategic Funding Plan stakeholdering, which also was centered around climate. So I wanted to let you know that today our presentation and our work will be building from previous work. We are not reinventing the wheel. We are not starting from scratch. We're trying to identify gaps and opportunities in our previous planning and refresh that plan But more importantly, we want to get everyone excited today about the potential for bringing a good chunk of the $4.6 billion that's available nationally into New Jersey to further our climate mitigation efforts. I want you to know that we are working very closely as a team to make sure that our conversations with all of you are intentional and focused. We are making every effort, and we'll make every effort to speak in plain English to translate our climate work into real life impacts, and we will listen. I am famous for saying I know what I don't know, and I think that's what we're all here to hear from you today. We want to know what we don't know and how we can improve our efforts moving forward. Thank you, Aishwarya.
Absolutely, Peg. Now moving on to our lead presenter, Helene, who I work extremely close with. So,
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Okay, so good afternoon. I want to thank you for joining us today on your lunch hour to talk about the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. Before I jump into the details, I think it's really important to highlight some of the reasons that we're here today. And I think Peg just eloquently said a lot of this, but just to put a little bit of a finer point on it, we really want to ensure that all of our New Jersey residents and local governments are aware of this opportunity through the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program and the amount of funding that it can bring into our state. We also want to share what New Jersey's vision is behind its statewide work plan for this grant. This meeting is also our formal launch of our stakeholder process for our Priority Climate Action Plan. And this is really the first of many stakeholder meetings and is meant to provide some of that vital background. And as we noted, we are recording this webinar and it will be made available on our website. And we encourage you to share this with other folks that are interested but maybe weren't able to attend today. And last but not least, we really hope that this webinar encourages all of our eligible applicants to start thinking creatively about potential grant applications. Millions of dollars will be made available to New Jersey, and we really want to position the state to bring in the greatest amount of money as possible to really help us achieve our greenhouse gas reduction goals. So now I'm going to step through the specifics of both phases of the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. So the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program, I'm going to refer from now on as CPRG since it's a mouthful. It is a two-phase grant program that's funded via the Inflation Reduction Act. And the first phase, which is already underway, provided non-competitive planning grants to states and local governments to develop a series of climate action plans focused on mitigating greenhouse gases. The second phase is a $4.6 billion competitive grant program, which was just launched a few weeks ago. Through this program, funding will be dedicated to implementation-ready greenhouse gas measures throughout the country. And as you can see at the bottom of this slide, we've included a link to the EPA's webpage, and we definitely suggest that you check that out to learn more about the implementation grant opportunity. So due to New Jersey's population density, we are blessed with having received 4 discrete planning grants that cover portions of the state. So NJDEP received a grant to develop statewide climate action plans. New York City EDC, in partnership with the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, received a grant that covers 12 counties in New Jersey, stretching from Sussex to Ocean. And that's the pink color that you see in this map. Levittown Planning Commission in Pennsylvania received a grant that covers a portion of Warren County. That's the yellow color in this map. And the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission received a grant that covers 5 counties in New Jersey, and that's the green color in this map. So needless to say, there's a great need for coordination between and across these plans. And there's very real potential for stakeholder fatigue. DEP, in partnership with these other organizations, have established monthly coordination meetings, and we're attempting to stay connected and streamline our efforts to the extent feasible. I would suggest if you're a municipal or county government or an interested resident and you're located in an area that's covered by both the statewide plan and a regional plan, that you should get involved in these planning efforts, as soon as possible. And all of these organizations will also be doing potentially their own stakeholdering in partnership with us. And we do intend to use the state's CPRG webpage to co-promote those opportunities for meetings and events and participation. So to dig down a little bit more on the planning grants. So this grant program requires the development of 3 deliverables over the next 4 years. The first deliverable is a priority climate action plan, which I'll refer to as a PCAP, which is due on March 1st. And as per EPA's guidance, the PCAP is really meant to focus on near-term, implementation-ready greenhouse gas reduction measures. And only measures included in our PCAPs can apply for implementation grant funding. So as noted before, this webinar is the kickoff stakeholder event for New Jersey's PCAP. And I will be discussing additional upcoming stakeholder engagements around the PCAP. The second deliverable is known as a Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, also referred to as a CCAP, and this is due in mid-2025. It will touch on all sectors and significant sources of greenhouse gas emissions and sinks of them, and we'll be using our CCAP here in New Jersey to update our 80 by 50 report. Finally, the last deliverable is a status update report, which is due in 2027. And this is where the state will report out on its progress to date, intended next steps, and needs for additional funding and staffing. And, to go back to our regional slide for a second, so you'll anticipate that there'll be four PCAPs, 4 CCAPs, and 4 status update reports that cover New Jersey. So EPA has requirements for each of these plans, and I'm just going to focus on the PCAP since that's the one that's due in the nearest future. So every entity writing a PCAP at a minimum needs to include a greenhouse gas inventory for the region that it covers, a list of quantified greenhouse gas reduction measures, a low income and disadvantaged communities benefits analysis, and an analysis of its authority to implement these measures. And you can see the PCAP is much more comprehensive and requires additional things like a workforce planning analysis, an evaluation of funding availability, and a full geographic scope benefits analysis. So now to shift gears a little bit and talk about phase 2, which is the implementation grants. So as noted, phase 2 is a competitive grant program. There is $4.6 billion available nationally, and New Jersey will be able to compete for $4.3 billion in funding, as approximately $300 million is set aside exclusively for eligible tribes and territories. So EPA anticipates issuing anywhere between 30 and 115 awards, and the minimum award size is $2 million, and maximum award size is upwards of $500 million. A letter of intent to apply is due on February 1st, 2024, and applications are due quickly following that on April 1st of 2024. So who can apply for funding? Entities that have received a phase 1 planning grant can apply, as well as any eligible entities who are applying to implement measures included in an applicable PCAP. So for New Jersey, eligible entities include our counties and municipal governments. And so I'll give you an example as well. So if New Jersey's statewide PCAP includes an action of school bus electrification, any muni or county throughout the state can then apply for funding to electrify their school fleets. Eligible entities can also submit up to 2 lead applications, one as an individual application and as a lead of a coalition, which is defined as a group of 2 or more eligible entities. But eligible entities can be partners in numerous coalition applications. Additionally, EPA has outlined a few ground rules, including that they will not award funding to implement measures in the same location in the same applications. Coalitions are not allowed to submit multiple applications for the same set of greenhouse gas reductions using different lead applicants. And applications are going to be evaluated holistically. They're not going to parse out and fund partial applications based on different greenhouse gas reduction measures. EPA's competitive grant program also really focuses on a handful of key concepts here. EPA is looking for states and municipalities and local governments to implement ambitious measures that will achieve significant cumulative greenhouse gas reductions by 2030 and beyond. These measures need to achieve substantial community benefits, such as reduction in criteria and hazardous air pollutants in low-income and disadvantaged communities. They need to complement other funding sources and show a strong need for funding that's currently unmet. And they need to demonstrate innovative policies and programs that can be scaled up across multiple communities. So what are some of the eligible project sectors? EPA has called out 7 areas that are eligible for funding. Within the implementation grant NOFO, they also called out some example measures, and I'll touch on a few of these now to give you a sense of the range of viable projects. So under transportation, some example measures included expanding electric vehicle charging infrastructure, adoption of electric vehicles, or transportation pricing programs that reduce vehicle miles traveled, such as parking pricing, congestion, and road pricing. Under electric power, examples included here were things like emission trading systems, like cap and trade programs, or streamlined permitting for renewable energy project. And under building, some viable concepts here included implementation of a clean heat standard or policies and programs that accelerate the adoption of efficient technologies such as heat pumps. So here's a snapshot of the main deadlines for the program. So the green is the implementation grant. So I think green for money and blue is for the planning grant. So implementation grant, the NOFA was issued in the end of September, and you can find that on EPA's website. By February 1st, you need to submit a notice of intent to apply for grant funding. By April 1st, you have to submit your grant application, and EPA has committed to announcing awards by July of 2024 for funding. In terms of the planning, our priority climate action plans are due March 1st. Our comprehensive climate action plans are due the summer of 2025, and status reports are due in 2027. So I'm going to take a breath, and we're going to walk through the specifics of DEP's approach to its statewide planning deliverables, and in particular, going to do a deeper dive on our priority climate action plan, the PCAP. So New Jersey is committed to taking decisive action on climate change, as evidenced by our ongoing climate mitigation planning and implementation efforts. Since 2019, we have issued a series of plans that are guiding our greenhouse gas reduction goals, including the Energy Master Plan, the Global Warming Response Act 80x50 report, and 2 RGGI strategic funding plans. We plan to build upon this existing work. We want to scale up our climate action, expand upon our existing slate of programs, and really address those critical gaps in our current implementation efforts. Our PCAP is going to focus on measures to reduce emissions 50% by 2030, while we anticipate the CCAP will be a more comprehensive report and serve as a refresh to our 2020 80x50 report. As noted earlier, EPA is requiring each PCAP to include 4 major elements. The first being a greenhouse gas inventory. New Jersey has released greenhouse gas inventory since the mid-2000s, and in recent years, we've committed to providing annual updates of our statewide inventory. We'll rely on our existing methodology, and we anticipate including a 2021 inventory in our PCAP. Similar to the 80x50 report, we will work to quantify all the expected emission impacts of discrete measures included in our PCAP. Additionally, we're going to provide a robust qualitative narrative about the co-benefits realized in low-income and disadvantaged communities from the implementation of these measures. We intend to identify co-benefits such as improvements to public health, resilience, reduction in energy burden, and community beautification. We also plan to highlight any implementation challenges moving forward with these measures, and we're definitely going to rely on our outreach with our communities and stakeholders to better understand where the sticking points are. Additionally, to the extent that time allows, we also plan to include emission projections and reduction targets by sector, strategic insights on how the state anticipates to leverage federal funding to achieve its greenhouse gas reduction goals, and a workforce planning analysis for the PCAP, which will identify anticipated labor changes necessary to implement these measures, barriers that underserved communities face in accessing related job opportunities, and opportunities for sector-specific workforce strategies. Here's a quick look at our timeline. So we were awarded our planning grant at the end of August. EPA released the notice of funding for implementation grants at the end of September. Between now and the end of December, we are going to be doing a lot of targeted stakeholder outreach events. There's going to be a lot of opportunity to have your voice be heard in this process, to make sure that we are capturing the things that are a priority for you and your communities in our PCAP. By January, we are going to release a draft PCAP framework. And really the plan around this is to ensure that if you are interested in applying for a CPRG grant through EPA, that you understand what's included in our PCAP and make sure that we are addressing what you would like to apply for. Come March, we will formally submit our PCAP. And by April, the state also intends to put in its own CPRG grant applications. So now to drill down a little bit more on our PCAP and what the priority sectors are. We took a broad approach here. We wanted to include as much as possible for our PCAP to ensure that we are getting as much funding opportunity as possible. So we've identified 6 priority sectors, focusing on our big 3, which is transportation, buildings, and electric generation, along with organic waste, halogenated gases, and our natural working lands, which serve as carbon sinks, helping to offset our state's emissions. Now, for each sector, I'm going to give a quick recap on the sources of emissions, state's goals, highlights our investments, and any advancements we've made to date. And then I'm going to float some potential early ideas around opportunities for CPRG funding and for our PCAP. And Stacy Richardson from the Board of Public Utilities is going to join me as well, and she's going to go over the buildings and electric generation sector. So I'm going to start with waste management. So this is one that's maybe not been as stakeholder as much as some of our other sectors, but waste is the largest source of non-energy greenhouse gas emissions in New Jersey. These emissions are predominantly associated with municipal solid waste management, as well as our management of our wastewater treatment byproducts, both of which are sources of methane and carbon dioxide in New Jersey. So currently within New Jersey, there are 12 active commercial landfills that accept waste. We also have 77 wastewater treatment facilities that treat over 500 million gallons of municipal, commercial, and industrial wastewater every day. These facilities can emit methane, which is considered a highly warming gas that's about 30 times more potent than a single ton of CO2. So the state has set a goal of reducing food waste 50% by 2030, with a priority of first reducing the amount of food waste that's being made, making sure that we're rescuing food and connecting that to our neediest communities. We've also found that there's a distinct opportunity for food waste to be processed at our local wastewater treatment facilities, and in turn turned into power for powering those facilities, providing energy security. The department has funded some of this work through its Recycling Enhancement Act grant program for higher education. So we do have a handful of investments that have been made in the past 5 years. There have been 6 food waste recycling programs that we funded directly for anaerobic digesters and rocket composters, including at Princeton Scrap Lab, Rutgers University, Raritan Valley Community College, Bergen Community College, and Kane and NJIT. We've also funded some research. Rutgers has a New Jersey Leaves No Bite Behind environmental education program for food waste in elementary schools. We've also studied and are creating, through a partnership with Stockton University, a food asset inventory and mapping project. And that's the goal, is to create an interactive food asset map that can really connect, access food with organizations that rescue that food and bring it to our communities. So potential opportunities here. There's definitely some gaps right now in the food donation, food rescue, supportive infrastructure. And I think there's an opportunity there through CPRG for us to think strategically about how can we make our food pantries, our community food banks, become more sustainable and sort of close the sustainability gap there. There's also potential opportunity for more distributed composting infrastructure for small scale, to allow schools, community organizations that do have a lot of food waste to be composting on site. And I think there's a nice nexus there around education. There's also an opportunity for large-scale food waste recycling facilities, which is supported through some of our food waste laws that are more recently on the books. And as I previously mentioned, there's an opportunity for waste-to-energy projects at wastewater treatment facilities. So again, these are just some early potential concepts that we're floating out there. We'd love to hear your feedback on these and to figure out, are there any major gaps that we're not seeing here or other opportunities we should be considering? Moving on, next sector is highly warming gases, and in particular hydrofluorocarbons, HFCs. These are probably the least well-known of our our global greenhouse gases, but they are the fastest growing source globally. They account for about 6% of the state's greenhouse gas emissions. And HFCs are a group of synthetic gases that are primarily used for cooling and refrigeration. And they've become widely in use because we phased out ozone depleting substances under the Montreal Protocol. So these are incredibly potent greenhouse gases. Their impact on global warming can be hundreds to thousands of times greater than 1 ton of carbon dioxide. The most abundant HFC in use in New Jersey is R404A, and it's actually close to 4,000 times more potent than 1 ton of CO2. So the state is really looking to stop the growth of emissions from HFCs by 2030 through phasing out products and improving our management of existing refrigerants. So to date, the state has been focusing on banning certain HFCs, and in 2020, the department adopted a reporting rule for the largest user of HFCs. And this data is going to be informative for future actions. We have about 900 facilities throughout the state that use these refrigerants. And so we're really interested in working with those facilities to figure out how can we help them transition to lower global warming potential products. So here are some opportunities that we've been thinking about. Is there potential for us to create an incentive program for low global warming potential refrigerant and chiller systems? Is there also potential for us to do some workforce development around refrigeration management program and better training and tools for the folks that work on these systems to make sure that we're handling them and capturing all of these synthetic gases before they get released to the atmosphere? And additionally, there's workforce development and opportunity for markets for new cooling products and technologies. So research and development can be part of this as well. Natural working lands are also really vital to our Global Warming Response Act goals. So these lands act as natural sinks. They actually help to remove about 8% of the state's greenhouse gases annually from the atmosphere. In the 80 by 50 report, we identified about 5 priority reduction pathways, including looking at our lands for reforestation options, ways that we can incorporate urban forestry, such as the planting of street trees. It's also key that we begin to eliminate the loss of forests to other land uses. The blue carbon resources are really key. So these are salt marshes and seagrass beds and submerged aquatic vegetation. These coastal systems are much smaller in size than our typical forests, but they sequester carbon at a much faster rate and continue to do so for millions of years. New Jersey, as a coastal state, really has a vested interest in protecting these types of systems because they also provide climate resiliency. New Jersey is also the garden state. We have a lot of agricultural lands that can play a role in sequestering carbon through tree planting, cover cropping, and better nutrient management. Additionally, we have a lot of forested land already that we need to continue to protect from climate risks such as wildfire, increased invasive species, pests, and disease. To date, we have done a lot of investment in our natural working lands through the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. We've funded the Natural Climate Solutions Program, which funds implementation of projects that create, restore, and enhance our carbon sinks. We've awarded $24.3 million across 14 different projects throughout the state that include things from urban street trees to tidal marsh restoration to reforestation projects. We've also launched the Trees for Schools program in partnership with Sustainable Jersey, and we've awarded close to $5 million across 34 public schools and colleges and universities to increase the number of trees that are planted on those campuses and on those properties. but there's more that can be done. So there's a lot of opportunity here as well. I think that we can continue to think about ways that we can encourage forest and urban canopy restoration on both private and public lands. We can continue to think about ways that we can accelerate our protection of our tidal marshes and restoration of those types of environments. Agricultural lands also need to have support in terms of how they can better sequester carbon and become climate friendly. And last but not least, there is definitely a need for additional technical assistance for landowners and land managers in the state. You know, this is often complex projects that, you know, the average person managing these lands needs assistance and how to roll these out and how to plan for them and get them implemented. Okay, so now I'm going to move into the big three. So the transportation sector, I know there's been a lot of stakeholdering about this over the years, but it's important because it is our largest single source of emissions in the state. So this sector includes emissions associated with on-road transportation, aviation, rail, and marine fuel use. Looking at the part on the left here, you can see that the vast majority of transportation-related emissions come from our on-road vehicles that we drive every day. So these are the passenger cars and light-duty trucks, and they make up about 80% of our emissions. The last few years, the state has adopted a series of goals to decarbonize the transportation sector. The EMP and 80 by 50 report call out the need to increase electric vehicle light-duty sales to 100% by 2035. And I believe the state is currently at around a 9% of light-duty vehicle sales or EVs. So you can see there's quite a delta there to still achieve. The state has also committed to a series of regional goals through NESCOM, which is an association of air quality agencies in the Northeast. And this includes achieving zero emission medium and heavy duty vehicle sales by 2030 and 100% by 2050. Since 2019, the state has invested nearly $240 million in vehicle electrification efforts through a series of incentive programs. Collectively, we've funded over 12,000 electric passenger vehicles, over 5,200 charging station ports, 5 e-mobility projects in overburden communities, over 280 electric trucks and vans, over 240 electric school shuttles and buses, and over 160 electric port and airport vehicles and equipment. But there's still a lot more to be done. We have a lot of ideas here. I think transportation is an opportunity and we need to continue to decarbonize here. There's the opportunity for us to continue to expand our light duty and medium and heavy duty charging infrastructure throughout the state. There's still a need for electrifying our medium and heavy duty vehicle and port equipment, which is located oftentimes in our most overburdened communities and can have real health benefits by electrifying those types of projects. There's potential for us to support the Mid-Atlantic Hydrogen Hub. Additionally, there's opportunity for us to begin to pilot grid supportive strategies. So any technology or program that's designed to reduce the impact of electric vehicle charging on the electrical grid. So this includes things like adding solar power or backup batteries to our charging hubs, or doing things like vehicle to grid technology that would allow electricity to be drawn from our electric vehicles onboard batteries and then delivered back to the grid. There's also opportunities for us to do things that improve the walking, biking, and transit infrastructure across the state to make sure that we're getting solutions for all types of mobility options. As noted previously, technical assistance is definitely a need here as well for fleet owners, and particularly for multi-unit dwelling structures. It is complex how to best plan and get our charging infrastructure in place for these types of buildings, so they need some additional assistance. There's opportunities for workforce programs here, as well as e-mobility programs across the state. I'm going to take a pause here as Stacy here from BPU just.
She is not on yet.
Okay.
As of now.
I am just going to keep rolling then and do the slides. Does that sound good? All right. So buildings. Buildings is the largest stationary source of emissions in the state, and collectively, I think it comes out to about 26% of our emissions. You can see the vast majority is associated with our use of natural gas and fuel oil and heating and cooling and cooking. The state has adopted some very aggressive greenhouse gas reduction goals for the building sectors. Recently, through executive order, we've set some goals of electrifying 400,000 residential buildings, 20,000 commercial properties by 2030.
Hey,
and
Helene,
making-
I'm gonna cut
Yep.
in really quick. Stacy
Yep.
just arrived.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. So sorry.
That's okay,
Got off a
Stacey.
meeting late.
Yep,
I see
all
you're in the
good.
middle of doing the building snapshot.
I was.
Okay,
But I
wonderful.
can
So-
hand it off to you. I was just talking goals, but I'd much rather
Awesome.
you talk about that.
Awesome. So, thanks everyone. So pursuant to Executive Order 316, we have some specific building decarbonization targets. So I think you may, Helene, have talked about the first point here, but maybe just backing up a step. So 90% of buildings must be converted to 100% clean energy, beginning in 2030. And then Executive Order 316 has some specific targets: 400,000 residential dwelling units and 20,000 commercial properties electrified by 2030, and also 10% of low and moderate income properties made electrification ready by 2030, meaning having the panels and wiring and any other preparations needed to go fully electric when the time is right. So, for example, there may be some low and moderate income homes that still have natural gas appliances that they have a fair amount of life in them, but if you can get them ready for when the time is right to make the switch, then it'll be more likely that they would actually make that switch. And then also the U.S. Climate Alliance has committed to install 20 million heat pumps across participating states by 2030, and we are part of that alliance. Some of the pathways are to electrify space and water heating. Clean heating is definitely a big priority and effort, and also to maximize energy efficiency. And I probably don't have to say it, but I'll say it anyway, that it's important to make sure that our buildings are as efficient as possible first, before we add in electrification measures or electrification initiatives, to make sure that the amount of energy that's being used is the most efficient as possible. I move on to the next slide. Okay, so in terms of some of the key drivers for investing in buildings, New Jersey adopted an appliance standards law last year, which came into effect in January of this year, raising the standards for certain appliances in the state. I should also actually mention that something that's not listed here is also building energy codes. New Jersey has adopted the most recently available building energy codes for new construction, for both residential and commercial new construction, that has also raised the standards in terms of efficiency in new buildings. The whole pilot program is something that we're very excited about in the state. A lot of low and moderate income residents, for example, are not able to invest in energy efficiency because there are health and safety issues with their homes that could include mold, lead, asbestos, structural issues. And so the whole house pilot program is designed to remediate those health and safety issues and also provide energy efficiency improvements and upgrades, and also include electrification measures where it's appropriate or would be beneficial to the residents, and potentially even include clean or renewable energy such as community solar. Overall, it's meant to be a holistic approach to a building, specifically serving low and moderate income customers in a way that leverages existing programs and resources throughout the state, and also provides a way for customers to participate without having to go to multiple, say, state agencies, but just put us through a sort of more of a one-stop experience. So we are implementing that pilot in Trenton with a goal of serving 100 homes and electrifying 20 to 30 of them. And we're doing that in partnership with PSE&G and Comfort Partners program, because it's in PSE&G's territory, but it's part of the Comfort Partners program. The idea would be to take lessons learned from that pilot, which will go to about first quarter of next year in 2024, take lessons learned and explore the possibility of expanding that statewide so that the benefits of this kind of initiative can be experienced by more customers. In what is called the second triennium of energy efficiency programs, this is the second 3-year program cycle. This is going to be, the board is expected to act actually tomorrow on the start of the triennium term, but that term will go from approximately the next year to 2027. And these are programs that are implemented or offered by all of the investor-owned electric and gas utilities in the state, as well as the BPU through our clean energy program. These programs offer incentives, financial incentives for buildings to become more efficient. So there are a specific new set of programs called the Building Decarb Startup Programs that are part of that that overall framework of programs that we're excited about, with a focus on low and moderate income customers again, and finding opportunities for the utilities to not only offer EE but also building decarb to customers. In terms of other key incentive programs, the Comfort Partners program I just mentioned, that's our low income energy efficiency program that offers EE incentives, EE upgrades at no cost to residents. That is jointly administered by the BPU and all the investor-owned electric and gas utilities. The Weatherization Assistance Program is actually administered by the Department of Community Affairs, but we have a good working relationship between Comfort Partners and WAP because they're both serving low-income customers. That's federally funded. There's an energy benchmarking program through the BPU that was called for by the Clean Energy Act of 2018. This requires building owners and operators of commercial buildings greater than 25,000 square feet to report on their energy and water use, and with the goal of understanding what the opportunities are to increase efficiency in their buildings and maybe even participate in some of the utility and state incentive programs. Utility programs, again, it's part of the main EE programs are being offered through the triennium. And there's something called the Local Government Energy Audit Program, which is offered through our New Jersey's Clean Energy Program, the BPU's program. This offers free audits to local governments, schools, and 501c3 nonprofits to assess opportunities for EE in their buildings. The Clean Energy Program also offers incentives for new construction, both residential and commercial. We are in the process of, we have been proposing some changes to that program to basically make it a single program for all new construction. We anticipate sending out a draft what we call compliance filing or proposal, basically for public comment in the next month or so, and to launch that new construction program in early 2024. The CPACE program is offered through the Economic Development Authority, EDA, to incentivize or to provide support for commercial buildings to invest in EE. That becomes part of the property assessment or the a lien on the building in the property. Clean Energy Program also offers the Large Energy Users Program, which is, again, EE incentives, but specifically for large energy users. And I should mention that all the utilities, also electric and gas utilities, also offer incentives for large energy users. So there's a lot of content there, but we can move on. So potential opportunities. While we are implementing projects and initiatives, we're also always thinking about what's the next frontier in terms of piloting new ideas and demonstrating how proof of concept, demonstrating how new programs could work in the future. As residential and commercial buildings seek to electrify, how do we provide enough sufficient funding? It could be in terms of financing, over time, or it could be some of the upfront capital costs that are needed in terms of financing. Workforce development is critical, as we seek to really engage in a massive amount of building electrification by 2030, 2035. We need the workforce to be ready and skilled and ready to perform this work, and to make sure that the jobs that are created are living wage jobs, family sustaining, that there are there's equitable representation in the workforce for all the work that needs to be done. And also effective pipelines, workforce development pipeline to make sure that there's a connection between the training and the employment, and make sure that it's all sort of thought through very thoroughly and carefully. And technical assistance, whether it's in the form of, how do building owners understand the opportunities for EE and building decarb? What assistance do they need to kind of understand some of the details of how that could work? Okay, electric generation snapshot. So you'll see here the significant amount of in-state electric generation emissions is from natural gas. And comparing that to some of the goals, while the current Energy Master Plan goal is to reach 100% clean energy by 2050, but of course, we are moving towards 100% clean energy by 2035 based on Executive Order 315. So the change will be that, the goal will be that 100% of clean electricity sold in New Jersey by 2035 that there will be 100% clean. We have some renewable portfolio standards of 35% by 2025 and 50% by 2030. So again, as we seek to some of the most cost-effective energy savings is achieved through energy efficiency. So our former president Pierre used to say the cheapest energy is the energy you don't use. And so how do we conserve in our buildings and in other ways, and energy consumption overall? How do we make it as efficient as possible? As we also develop cleaner sources of electricity and transition away from fossil fuel electric generation, at the same time that we're looking to continue to procure out-of-state renewables. Some highlights here in terms of clean electric generation. Thus far, we have procured 3.7 gigawatts of offshore wind and are in the process of reviewing the third solicitation for offshore wind development. In solar, we have 4.5 gigawatts in the state thus far, specifically through our administratively determined incentive program. This is meant for smaller solar projects. We have 336 megawatts of capacity. I should mention we also have the CSI, or competitive solar incentive program, that's for larger solar projects. That program is also in play, and we're very excited about our community solar program with about 55 megawatts of capacity. This program is designed to enable access to solar by residents who are not able to develop solar directly, in their properties, but can register to participate. Some upcoming opportunities, the grid is in great need of upgrading and keeping it and modernizing as we add more clean energy to the grid. Specifically, solar interconnection is a big focus, and also how do we, incorporate storage. That's sort of covered both, the interplay between solar and storage is covered in that first box right there, but also specifically, as we look to increase our adoption of energy storage, it's been a relatively expensive, technology. But again, solar also used to be very expensive. So, as we look at the government's role to encourage market transformation, we're really looking to see the cost of energy storage go down and adoption increase. Storage will be important as we continue to expand solar and other sources of renewable energy in the state. Equity is important in everything that we do, in all of our clean energy initiatives. How are we doing it in an equitable and inclusive way? And I kind of alluded to this before, but workforce is always top of our minds in terms of the incredible amount of growth that we're going to see in clean energy. Will provide great economic opportunities for job creation.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thanks,
Appreciate you
Elaine.
pitch hitting there.
Sure.
Giving me a break. So now I'm just going to touch a little bit on some of our principles for engagement around the PCAP. I won't talk about all of these, but I'll just touch on a few. It's really important to us as a department and as a state that we ensure that this process is inclusive and equitable so that all stakeholders, especially those from overburdened communities, do feel like they have an equal opportunity to participate and have a voice. We're trying to create authentic partnerships where we work in a collaborative and respectful way and build trust and understanding. We want to provide stakeholders with culturally relevant engagement, education and empowerment opportunities so that they can participate effectively. We're here to build upon, community-led solutions, and we really would love for long-term collaboration and maintain these relationships throughout this process. This is a 4-year-long process through the EPA, but we really see this as informing all of our climate planning work now through 2050 and beyond. So the work that we're doing now is really going to lay the groundwork to have really strong partnerships throughout the state. And our approach to engagement, we want to build off what we've done to date, cultivate strong partnerships. We sort of see 8 major areas, our sister agencies, our local governments and municipalities, the regional organizations and bordering states that are also tackling the climate crisis, and how can we come up with regional solutions with them, our community members and organizations, of course, our environmental justice advocates who played such an important role in being a voice for a lot of communities, our environmental organizations, our institutions that are foundational for a lot of communities, such as our universities, and of course, industry plays a really important role here. With that, I will hand it back to Aishwarya to moderate our Q&A.
Thank you, Helene, and thank you, Stacy and Peg, for being part of this. Moving on to the question and answer session. So please use the raise hand feature if you would like your mic to be enabled to directly provide comments or ask a question. It should be located at the top right hand of your screen in Microsoft Teams, different from Zoom. You may now drop your name, affiliation, and questions in the chat. Doug, our chat moderator, will read questions. As a reminder, please keep your questions brief and related to the CPRG program. Thank you.
We do have a hand up from Deborah, so I will unmute. Should be able to speak. If not, we can come back to you. But Deborah Italiana. Okay, we're not.
I'm sorry, Deborah. I don't think we can hear you yet.
I think we may have to go with participants submitting their questions in the chat. I'm not seeing the ability to unmute the participants. So, Deborah, if you could add your question into the chat, we can address it there. Sorry about that.
So it looks like she could potentially unmute herself now. I don't know.
Okay, so Deborah wrote in the chat, are the funding proposals for the program to be submitted to DEP or EPA directly?
So DEP does anticipate putting together a grant application itself. And we will, at a later date, likely be, looking for potential projects and partners, but any eligible entity is also able to apply. So if you're from a local government, from a county, municipal government, you can put in your own grant application as well.
Yeah, again, I'm not seeing the ability to unmute the participant. So for Carl or Bill, if you want to type your question into the chat, we can address it there. I know that some folks have already asked questions in the chat, and we can start to address some of those questions. So we had one question from Regine Delsey. Regine asked, Mercer County is currently working with DVRPC on our region's climate pollution reduction grant plan. Can you please provide more clarification on how is this regional plan different from and/or related to the New Jersey state plan? Additionally, Mercer County, New Jersey was informed that they were not eligible to apply for funding due to their county's population size. Is that correct?
Ooh, that is news to me. I was under the impression.
Elaine, I think she's talking about the planning grant.
Oh, the planning grant. Gotcha. No,
right.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just to clarify, as long as you are applying, you're an eligible entity. So in New Jersey, that is either a municipality or county, you can apply for an implementation grant as long as you're applying for a measure or action that's captured in a PCAP that covers your location. So for Mercer County, you could apply for an action that's in DVRPC's Priority Climate Action Plan or an action or measure that's in the statewide climate action plan. So you are covered by two plans. So there's a cornucopia potentially of options for you as a county official to apply for reduction measures. But yeah, it is confusing. And I think that's why, on our webpage, we do have the map. And, we really want it to be clear for people that they are potentially covered by two plans. But we are trying to work together very closely with DVRPC to make sure that, all of this is aligned as much as possible and to reduce the amount of, stakeholder fatigue around these concepts and topics.
So we also have a question in the chat from Bill. How do we avoid duplication or, more importantly, gaps between the 4 state regions? Is New Jersey coordinating with other states and countries, or I guess maybe counties, with these programs?
We sure are. We've been hosting monthly meetings with all of the regional recipients of planning grants, as well as our bordering states. And, we are beginning to discuss, ways that we can coordinate on our stakeholder efforts, as well as the content of the plans to make sure that, we are aligned as much as possible and streamline this process. Though I will note that this is a very quick turnaround for these types of plans. So I think to the extent, feasible, communication is going to be key here. And if you all are participating in statewide stakeholder engagement plans through DEP's efforts, bringing your voice and topic also to the regional plans will be really important to make sure that, we're all on the same page and that your voice is fully being heard and you're covered in your plan if you do anticipate applying for funding.
We had several questions from our participant, Dan Halbin. So Dan asked, can you say again what the minimum grant amount is from the EPA?
$2 million.
$2 million. Dan also asked, are zoning and local ordinance updates that advance the program goals, for example, transit-oriented development, green building requirements, solar permitting ordinances, eligible for funding?
Yes, all of that would be considered eligible for funding as long as that is written into a PCAP that covers your geographic location. So again, I'll just advocate to say that, make sure that your voice is heard in any regional plan that covers you, as well as the statewide plan. I'd also note, though, that the implementation grant wants to see quantified greenhouse gas reductions. So that is one of the things you'd have to think about is, how would these policy changes, how would we quantify that out to 2030 and then out to 2050?
And Dan's final question was, is there any reason that a fat chunk of this money couldn't be directed towards programs like Green Acres, Blue Acres, or other land preservation or restoration programs?
Yeah, I think that's all viable options for sure.
Okay, we had a quick question, from Carl Christensen. Does the development of a climate action plan under Sustainable Jerseys program potentially qualify for grant under your programs?
Yeah, so we have to write a priority climate action plan for EPA. So this will be a statewide plan. We are coordinating closely with Sustainable Jersey, as well as with the Clean Energy Planning Grant communities, and we'll be having one meeting with them on November 2nd. So if you did receive a grant to write a plan, we're hopefully be talking with you on the 2nd to talk about what priorities your community has identified in that plan and to make sure that that is going to be reflected in the statewide PCAP, so that, if in your own plan you said, I really want to electrify my municipal fleet, that is something that we would then include as a priority action in the statewide plan, so that any community that has that as a goal could then apply for funding for those efforts.
We had a question from Renata Barnes. The question was, can these grants be used to support and deepen programming that is already in progress and being facilitated by a nonprofit, BIPOC-led, and is inclusive of the dominant culture?
Yeah, so nonprofits are not eligible entities to directly apply. But I do believe that, a local government, municipal, or the state application could fold them in as a subaward in some capacity for a particular project or program implementation. But I don't know, Peg, if you have other thoughts and you want to chime in on that.
No, you're good.
We have a question from someone in the chat, Colin Lay. How can we join these future CPRG regional meetings?
Yeah, great question. So to my knowledge, we did reach out prior to our webinar to try to get a list of other meetings, and we were, I don't think the other regional meetings have officially selected dates and times yet, but we will be posting them when they become available on DEP's webpage. And I see Blythe put her hand up. I know she's from NJTPA. But we do plan on, having the state webpage be a hub, try to push out this information. And if you join our NJ Climate email list, which if you go to the bottom of the state's CPR webpage, you can join there. We'll be sending notifications out via that email list to inform you about upcoming stakeholder events.
We had a question early on from Alex Clayton about how will the state's upcoming natural and working lands action plan figure into this planning? Will natural working lands be included within the greenhouse gas inventory? Alex asked again, kind of the same question. How does that natural working lands action plan figure into this type of planning?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. So I know that plan isn't been public yet. So we do plan on using that as a foundation for some of the priorities here, and that, ideally the priorities that are in the PCAP are going to align closely with the goals and actions that are laid out in the state's natural working land strategy. I think the goal is for that to be published by the end of the year. And we will be having, and I haven't gotten to that part of the presentation yet, but a natural working lands sector specific workshop in November. So there, we're going to be talking more specifically about priorities within each of these natural working lands to get a better handle on what you and your community really need to do to maximize carbon sequestration and what can provide the most benefits to your citizens.
We had a question from Carlos Sosa from the Environmental Defense Fund asking if we could clarify how the recently released DEP Strategic Climate Action Plan interacts or informs the CPRG efforts.
Yeah, so the Strategic Climate Action Plan really governs all of DEP and all of its efforts, both internally and externally. So I think that that's sort of a great lens on this. And within that plan, we call out all of these sectors and the actions that are vital to achieving our greenhouse gas reductions within those sectors. So yeah, I think that's just kind of like another layer and another thing we're planning on building upon for these actions. But again, the PCAP is really meant to capture municipal priorities on some level to ensure that you can apply for funding in your own municipality. So really want to make sure that that is the focus and that we're accurately capturing what our communities want.
We had a question from Isaac Berg. Will the Climate Action Plan speak to or address the regulatory barriers to implementation? For example, things like permitting issues regarding distributed composting solutions.
Yes, it will. That's a requirement, is that we include in the PCAP a discussion of implementation hurdles. And so when we do additional stakeholdering, please plan to attend. We're going to have a food waste sector specific one. We would like to drill down and have a really concise understanding of what are the regulatory barriers and how can we begin to get an action plan to reduce them to make sure that we're implementing in real time to achieve our 2030 goal.
We'll get this question we just got from David Heller. Are MPOs eligible to apply for any of the phase 2 implementation grants?
So I know you're from South Jersey Transportation Authority. It is my understanding that you directly cannot, but that you can be a partner to DVRPC's application or the statewide application, or any municipal applications that are within your territory.
We had at least two questions that were sort of related to the waste sector and wastewater treatment facility biogas. So we had a question from Eric Miller who asked, so just to clarify, is the DEP or the DEP is considering wastewater treatment biogas recovery for on-site power, not gas distribution system injection?
Yeah, at this time we're thinking about anaerobic digesters. How can wastewater treatment facilities take on additional food waste from the local community, install anaerobic digesters to create biogas, and then can feed that back in, power their own system operations and or microgrids that would provide resiliency to neighboring communities.
And a related question in the same sector, Laura Tessier asked, for municipal wastewater facilities interested in funding for waste to energy projects, what should they be doing now to position for implementation grant funding?
I would say reach out. We have a comment form on our webpage. If you are interested in this, I suggest you slide in a comment. We can, have some preliminary discussions around opportunities here.
Just dropped a link to the webpage in the chat, and that's where the comment form lives. We have a question from Deborah. How do the goals outlined here by New Jersey DEP, the New Jersey statewide greenhouse gas reduction, square with proposed plans for fossil fuel projects in the state?
Okay, you want to answer that one?
Read the question again, please.
How do the goals outlined during this presentation here by DEP are regarding New Jersey statewide greenhouse gas reduction goals squared with proposed plans for more fossil fuel projects in the state?
That's a good question. I'm not sure we're prepared to answer that today. We don't have the right people on the phone, but may we email you with an answer on that? Who is it from? Deborah?
It's from
Yeah,
Deborah from
Yeah,
Sustainable Jersey. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, Deborah, let us get to the right people internally and we'll shoot you an email afterwards. Sorry about that.
So we have another question from Dan Halbin. Can the funds be used to create a new municipal department or staff person to implement programs that are otherwise outside the municipality's capacity to administer? So maybe this also asks, can funds be used for, personnel cost or?
Yeah, it's my understanding that EPA is open to have funding providing staffing. I think we all understand there's a lot of limited capacity right now, and just generally in municipalities, and that's a great need.
Okay, looking through other questions. Someone asked if we could share the link to the recording and PowerPoint that would be available. So we will be sending out the information with the link and recording to registrants after the webinar. It will just be on that CPRG website that we sent the link to as well. So you can check back there for both the slides and the recording, and the comment form is also located there. I think we already addressed this, but someone asked, can a nonprofit apply to, I guess, the implementation grant?
No, unfortunately, it's limited to the eligible entities as defined by EPA, which is municipal governments, local governments, eligible tribes and territories.
Okay. Will private entities qualify for this funding opportunity? If not, will there be a separate program? That's from Ronnie Garcia.
Yeah, I think that, depending on the grant applications that we put in, that they would be funding could flow through to private entities, to industry businesses across the state, but they directly themselves can apply. But again, as I noted earlier, we do intend to do additional stakeholdering to get a better handle on what types of projects and programs we as a state would apply for funding for, as well as, municipal governments, counties should be thinking as well about what they should apply for, and they could cover businesses, industries, nonprofits within their grant application.
And I'll just add to that the terms of this grant opportunity are dictated by EPA, not us. So as far as we know, this is a one-time national competition of $4.6 billion, and there will not be another round of opportunity for this particular pot of money, which was a line item from the Inflation Reduction Act.
We had another question from Stanislav, who asked, can municipal government hire a nonprofit after they get the funding to execute a program?
Yeah, I would imagine that would be viable.
Okay.
We think that's it, Doug? Is there anything else? Or I do have a few more slides I want to go over.
Yeah, we can see if more questions come through. Also, we'll be able to, any questions we didn't get to answer, we have them recorded so we can go and follow up with the person who asked them after the meeting. So.
Okay. So I do want to end on some of, our upcoming stakeholder events. I did note some of these. So we're having 2 municipal workshops, one on Thursday, co-hosted with Sustainable Jersey, and that's with their Urban Sustainability Hub. So we'll be meeting with some urban municipalities in the state, and we're going to talk a lot more about CPRG at that meeting and start to hear about what the priorities are. On November 2nd, we also have a meeting co-hosted with the Board of Public Utilities in Sustainable Jersey and the communities that receive funding to create clean energy plans. So we know potentially those municipalities are ahead in terms of some of their climate greenhouse gas reduction planning efforts, and we would love to hear from them. We also, in partnership with Rutgers University, are going to be hosting 3 topical workshops in early November. So November 8th, we'll be hosting one focused on natural working lands. So we definitely invite folks to please attend all of these and to spread the word. On November 9th, we're going to be discussing food waste. And November 13th, we'll be talking highly warming gases and in particular HFCs. But I do want to just note that additional events are going to be scheduled for other sectors and other interest groups. This is going to be a sprint of stakeholdering between now and the end of December. So there'll be a lot of opportunities. And again, just one more plug for our webpage. You'll find all the information there, as well as joining our NJ Climate Listserv so that you can stay up to date. And here we go. So our webpage, in case you didn't get it from the chat, dep.nj.gov/climate change /mitigation/CPRG. Maybe I'll hand it back to you, Doug. Did any other questions come in?
We don't have any more in the chat that I see.
Okay.
We do have Carl. Carl's hand is still raised, and unfortunately we can't unmute. So Carl, if you have a question that you wanted to ask, if you could type that in the chat now, we could try to get to it. Otherwise, we can also follow up. And you can submit questions or comments on our website. So there's the comment form on the webpage. It's another place to submit questions. Okay, so that sounds like we answered it. So.
Hooray! All right, thanks everybody. I appreciate your time today. Have a good one.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.